The Galactic Assembly Hall stretched across 3 kilometers of polished crystal floors and soaring archways that reached toward the artificial sky above. Representatives from 847 different species filled the massive chamber, their voices creating a symphony of clicks, whistles, growls, and harmonic frequencies that the translation devices worked constantly to convert into understandable speech. In the center of the hall, arranged in concentric circles, sat the delegation pods where each species conducted their business and cast their votes on matters that affected trillions of beings across the known galaxy. Station 3. Row 47 had remained empty for 23 standard years. The designation plaque still read Terra, Sol System in 12 major galactic languages, but dust had begun to gather on the smooth surface of the unused pod. Most species had long since stopped looking at the empty space, though newer delegates sometimes asked about it during their orientation sessions. Counselor Velmoth raised 3 of his 6 segmented arms to signal for attention. His chitinous shell gleamed under the assembly lights as his compound eye swept across the gathered delegates. "We return once again to agenda item 7042, he announced, his mandibles clicking with what those familiar with his species recognized as irritation. The question of Earth's continued membership status despite their persistent absence from these proceedings. A murmur ran through the assembly. This debate had occurred at least once every standard year since the humans had been granted their seat. The initial excitement of discovering another sapient species had long since faded into confusion and then into a sort of bureaucratic annoyance at the empty chair that disrupted the symmetry of the hall. "Perhaps they went extinct," offered one delegate, a floating gaseous being whose words formed in colored clouds. "Their star system showed signs of industrial pollution when we first made contact. Maybe they destroyed themselves before they could join us. Or perhaps they were simply afraid," suggested a sleek aquatic representative through her translation unit. "They received our invitation, saw the scope of the galaxy, and realized how small and insignificant they were. Some species cannot handle that truth." Velmoth's antennae twitched in agreement. The humans sent one transmission upon receiving our invitation. They said they were honored and would prepare for attendance. That was in the year 2324 by their calendar. We have heard nothing since. No distress signals, no requests for assistance, no further communication of any kind. "Then I move we revoke their membership," declared Kruthak, rising from his pod on powerful hind legs. The reptilian warrior's scales caught the light as he gestured dramatically. "We have species waiting decades for admission to this assembly. Species who actually want to be here and contribute to galactic society. Why should we hold a seat for cowards or corpses?" Several delegates voiced their agreement with various sounds and bioluminescent displays. The motion was about to be called to a vote when every communication panel in the chamber suddenly chimed in unison. The head coordinator, a being of pure energy contained in a crystalline matrix, spoke with urgency that cut through all other conversations. "Attention, assembly. We have received a docking request from an unknown vessel claiming to represent Earth. They are requesting permission to attend today's session." The chamber fell silent. Even the constant background hum of translation devices seemed to pause. Velmoth recovered first, his political instincts overriding his surprise. "Unknown vessel? Scan them. Verify their credentials. Scans show a ship of unusual design. Heavy construction, thick hull plating, primitive but functional fusion drives. The vessel appears to be designed to withstand significant stress and damage. They are broadcasting identification codes that match the original contact protocols from 23 years ago." "Let them dock," Velmoth decided, though his tone suggested he expected some kind of trick or mistake. "But increase security around the assembly hall. We don't know what to expect from a species that ignores us for over 2 decades and then appears without warning. The delegates settled into an uneasy waiting period, their previous business forgotten. Speculation filled the air in a dozen languages. What would these humans look like? Would they be warriors arriving in a warship to make demands? Would they be refugees, finally desperate enough to seek help? Would they even still be recognizable as the heat signature-based life forms detected in those initial scans? 40 minutes later, the main entrance to the assembly hall opened with a soft pneumatic hiss. Every eye, sensor, and detection organ in the chamber turned toward the doorway. What emerged made several delegates lean forward in their pods with curiosity, while others sat back in relief. 2 humans walked into the Galactic Assembly Hall with quiet confidence. They were bipedal, bilaterally symmetrical, and stood approximately mid-range in height compared to the gathered species. Their skin was a warm brown tone, and they wore simple dark suits that covered most of their bodies. No visible weapons, no armor plating, no natural defenses that any scanner could detect. They looked remarkably ordinary. The male human stepped forward first, his dark eyes taking in the massive chamber with what appeared to be calm assessment rather than the almost first-time visitors displayed. He placed one hand over his chest in what was presumably a gesture of respect and spoke clearly, waiting for the translation to ripple through the assembly. Honorable members of the Galactic Assembly, I am Ambassador Tae-1 of Earth. This is Chief of Security Hyjin. On behalf of humanity, I apologize for our delayed arrival. We have been preparing. Velmoth studied the creatures carefully. They had no claws, no fangs, no protective shells. Their eyes were forward-facing, which suggested predator ancestry, but they seemed physically unremarkable otherwise. Soft, vulnerable, and alone in a chamber filled with species that had evolved under countless different conditions. Preparing? Velmoth asked, unable to keep the skepticism from his voice. For 23 years? Tae-1 smiled, and something in that expression made Hyjin's lips quirk slightly at the corners as well. Yes, Counselor. We wanted to make sure we got it right. The welcome ceremony was a carefully orchestrated affair that took place in one of the assembly's smaller chambers. Tae-1 and Hyjin were joined by 3 other humans who had remained on their ship during the initial introduction. Minsu, identified as the Chief Science Officer, was a lean man with gray streaking through his black hair and eyes that seemed to catalog everything they saw. Ji-Woo, the Cultural Liaison, was a woman who smiled warmly and bowed respectfully to each species she was introduced to, her movements graceful and practiced. The third was Bio-Ram, a younger woman who carried various recording devices and seemed focused on documenting everything. Velmoth had insisted on the ceremony, partly out of tradition and partly because he wanted time to assess these newcomers properly. The format was standard. Each major species representative would greet the new members, share a brief statement of welcome, and offer their symbolic gift of cooperation. It usually took about 2 hours and was considered one of the more tedious requirements of assembly membership. Your species appears quite fragile, observed Takal, a crystalline being whose body refracted light into rainbow patterns. The statement wasn't meant as an insult, merely an observation. Your atmospheric requirements are narrow, your temperature tolerance limited, and you possess no natural armoring or defensive adaptations. Minsu nodded without any sign of offense. That's an accurate assessment. Humans are what you might call generalists rather than specialists. We evolved to adapt to changing conditions rather than to perfectly suit a single environment. Interesting evolutionary strategy, hummed a fungal collective intelligence. Though it does leave you vulnerable to species with more focused advantages. Every approach has its trade-offs, Ji-Woo agreed pleasantly, accepting a crystallized spore sample as the fungal collective's gift. We've learned to work with what we have. The ceremony continued smoothly until Kruthik approached. The reptilian warrior moved with the deadly grace of a born predator, his clawed feet clicking against the floor. He stood nearly a full meter taller than Taewon and outweighed him by at least 50 kilograms of pure muscle. Kruthik's people had a reputation as the finest warriors in the assembly, and he clearly took pride in that status. "Humans," Kruthik said, looking down at the delegation. "I am curious about something. Your world's gravity is listed as 9.8 meters per second squared. This is higher than most assembly worlds. Yet you appear no stronger than species from lighter gravity environments. Do you augment yourselves mechanically? Use genetic modifications, perhaps?" Hyjin spoke for the first time since entering the chamber, her voice calm and level. "No augmentation. This is baseline human physiology." Krathik's eyes narrowed. "Impossible. Either your species evolved extremely inefficiently, or you are lying about your home world's conditions." He flexed his arms, displaying impressive musculature. "I could break you in half without effort." The chamber grew very quiet. Several delegates shifted uncomfortably. Challenging another species to combat during a welcome ceremony was not exactly against the rules, but it was certainly considered poor taste. However, craftspeople valued strength above all else, and they had little patience for what they perceived as deception. Taewon raised a hand, calmly before Hyjin could respond. "I'm sure you could," honored Kruthik. "We don't doubt your strength. However, I think you'll find that humans evolved under a different set of pressures than pure physical power." "What pressures make you so weak, then?" Kruthik demanded. "Your world has no mega-predators? No extreme weather? No resource competition?" "Oh, we had all of those things," Minsu interjected, his tone conversational. "We still do, actually. Earth is what we call a high-energy environment. Strong storms, seismic activity, temperature extremes, and yes, plenty of predators. The thing is, humans didn't survive by being the strongest. We survived by being persistent." "Persistent?" Kruthik scoffed. "Pretty words for weakness." Hyjin took one step forward, and though her movement was smooth and controlled, something in her posture made several nearby delegates instinctively back away. "If you'd like to test human persistence, I'd be happy to arrange a demonstration. Your choice of competition." The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Hyjin wasn't threatening or aggressive in any obvious way, but there was something in her eyes, something in the way she held herself, that suggested Kruthik might be making a mistake. The reptilian warrior stared at her for a long moment, his predator instincts clearly warring with his pride. Velmoth intervened smoothly. "I think we've had enough cultural exchange for one day. Ambassador Taewon, your delegation must be tired from your journey. We've prepared quarters for you in the diplomatic sector. Tomorrow we'll begin the formal orientation process." "Thank you, Counselor," Taewon said with another small smile. "We appreciate your hospitality." As the humans filed out of the chamber, Velmoth noticed something odd. Every member of the human delegation moved with the same quiet confidence, the same awareness of their surroundings, the same relaxed but ready posture. It reminded him of security personnel or military escorts, not scientists and diplomats. He made a mental note to research Earth more thoroughly. Later that evening, in the privacy of his own quarters, Velmoth accessed the Assembly's database on humanity. The file was surprisingly thin, containing only the initial contact reports and basic environmental scans of their home world. The humans had provided almost no information about themselves, beyond the bare minimum required for membership consideration. He pulled up the initial scan data from the probe that had first detected Earth's radio signals. The planet rotated quickly, giving it short days. Large oceans covered most of the surface, with land masses concentrated in several clusters. The atmospheric composition was oxygen-rich, actually slightly toxic to many species if breathed too long. Weather patterns showed massive storm systems forming regularly. Tectonic activity was higher than galactic average. Velmuth's antennae twitched as he read further. Earth's moon was unusually large for a planet of its size, creating significant tidal forces. The planet had experienced at least 5 mass extinction events in its geological record, with many dominant species being completely wiped out and replaced. Yet life had persisted, adapted, evolved. And then there were the humans themselves. The scans had detected high-density skeletal structures, redundant organ systems, and an unusual brain-to-body mass ratio. Their bodies produced dozens of different chemical compounds for various functions, including some that could be classified as toxins in other species. They could survive an impressive range of temperatures and atmospheric pressures for extended periods. Most interesting was a note in the evolutionary section. Humans were classified as persistence predators, a hunting strategy rarely seen in sapient species. They would chase prey for hours or even days until the target collapsed from exhaustion. They didn't need to be faster or stronger, just more stubborn and enduring. Velmuth sat back in his chair, his compound eyes reflecting the light from the data screen. These soft-looking, vulnerable creatures came from a world that would kill most assembly species within days. They had evolved to simply outlast whatever tried to stop them. And they had spent 23 years preparing before showing up to join the galactic community. He sent a message to Quell, an information broker he sometimes used for sensitive research. The message was simple: find out everything you can about human military capabilities. Spare no expense. I need to know what they've really been doing for the past 2 decades. The return message came quickly. Interesting timing. Several others have made similar requests. Price has gone up, but I'll have a preliminary report in 3 days. The Velmuth settled into wait, a feeling of unease growing in his thorax that he couldn't quite explain. The orientation process for new assembly members typically lasted 1 standard week and covered everything from voting procedures to emergency protocols. On the 3rd day, there was always a cultural exchange session where the new species would present their history, achievements, and social structures to the gathered delegates. It was meant to be a celebration of diversity and a chance for everyone to learn about the newcomers. Dong Hyan arrived at the presentation hall carrying several data storage devices and what appeared to be a paper book, an actual physical object made from processed plant fibers. Several delegates stared at the primitive artifact with curiosity. The human was middle-aged by his species standards, with thoughtful eyes and a careful way of speaking that suggested he chose his words deliberately. I am Dong Hyan, Earth's historical archivist, he began. I've been asked to present an overview of human history and development. I apologize in advance if some of the information seems uncomfortable. Humans had a rather different developmental path than most species represented here. He activated a holographic display that showed Earth rotating slowly in space. Our planet, as you know, is what we call a Class M world with high tectonic activity, variable climate, and strong gravitational pull. Life on Earth has been shaped by what we call extinction pressure. Every few million years, something catastrophic happens. Asteroid impacts, volcanic eruptions, climate shifts, ice ages. Each time, most species die out. But some survive, adapt, and evolve. The hologram shifted to show a timeline stretching back millions of years. Humans evolved from primate ancestors roughly 2 million years ago. Our development was driven by several factors. First, we lost most of our natural defenses. No claws, no armor, relatively weak bite force. Second, we became upright walkers, which freed our hands for tool use, but made us slower runners. Third, we developed unusually large brains relative to our body size, which required enormous amounts of energy to maintain. Sun He, the xenobiologist, stepped forward to add context. Human infants are born extremely underdeveloped compared to most species. We require years of intensive care and teaching before we can survive independently. This created strong social bonding and learning behaviors. Humans are, by necessity, cooperative and knowledge-sharing creatures. That sounds almost peaceful, observed one delegate. Hopefully Dong Haiyan's expression grew more serious. Unfortunately, cooperation within groups often meant competition between groups. Human history is marked by conflict, tribal warfare, territorial disputes, resource competition. We developed sophisticated weapons long before we developed space travel. The hologram showed a series of images: stone tools, metal blades, gunpowder weapons, and then increasingly destructive technologies. Several delegates shifted uncomfortably in their seats. In our 20th century, we fought two major global conflicts we call world wars, Dong Haiyan continued. The first killed approximately 17 million people. The second killed more than 70 million. That's 17 million individuals dead in a 6-year period. Our global population at the time was around 2 billion, so we lost roughly 3% of our entire species. A shocked murmur ran through the assembly. Most species had conflicts, but casualties on that scale were almost unimaginable. Some species had never had a war that killed even 1,000 individuals. During that second war, humans developed atomic weapons, devices that could destroy entire cities in seconds using nuclear fission. We used them twice, killing over 200,000 people in 2 attacks. Then we invented even more powerful versions using fusion. By the 1960s, we had enough nuclear weapons to destroy all life on our planet several times over. Klothak leaned forward with sudden interest. You nearly destroyed yourselves? We came very close several times, Dong Haiyan confirmed. But we didn't. We learned to control these weapons, established treaties, and began working together instead of against each other. The period from our first atomic bomb to our first unified planetary government took about 150 years. We call it the unification era. Why are you telling us this? Demanded Velmuth, his antennae rigid with tension. This makes your species sound dangerous and unstable. Tae-Won stood from his seat in the audience. Because you need to understand where we come from, counselor. Humans evolved on a world that tried to kill us regularly. We competed against each other for resources when we couldn't compete against our environment. We made terrible mistakes and learned from them. All of this shaped who we are today. Minsu activated another display, this one showing human physiology in detail. Let me add some biological context. Humans can run for hours without stopping, a trait we used to hunt prey by chasing them until they collapsed. We can survive without food for weeks and without water for days. We heal from injuries that would kill most species. We have an entire system dedicated to fighting disease and infection. Our bodies produce adrenaline, a chemical that temporarily increases our strength and pain tolerance during emergencies. We also have an unusually high tolerance for physical and psychological stress, Sun He added. Humans can function in combat situations, natural disasters, and life-threatening scenarios that would leave most species catatonic with fear. We actually evolved to handle constant stress. Ji Woo spoke up from the side of the hall. Earth's environment shaped us to be survivors. Our history shaped us to be fighters. But our choice has been to become builders instead. That's why we took 23 years to prepare before joining you. We wanted to be sure we came in peace, not in fear or aggression. Velmuth was beginning to understand, and the understanding made his entire body feel cold. You stayed away because you were afraid you might see us as a threat. We stayed away because we didn't know what we'd find out here, Taewon corrected gently. We had just unified our own world after thousands of years of conflict. We weren't sure if the galaxy would welcome us or try to conquer us. We needed time to prepare for both possibilities. What does prepare mean exactly? Asked Takal, the crystalline being. Donghain looked at Taewon, who nodded permission to continue. During the 23 years since first contact, humanity colonized 14 star systems, built a defensive fleet of 3,000 vessels, established military protocols for defending our territory, and developed countermeasures for every major weapon type we could theorize. We also studied every species in the assembly from a distance, learning your capabilities, your cultures, and your potential intentions. The chamber exploded into alarmed chatter. 3,000 ships? 14 colonies? Military protocols? This didn't sound like a species preparing to join the galactic community. It sounded like a species preparing for war. K. Thok rose to his feet, respect evident in his posture. You are warriors. We are survivors, Haijin corrected firmly. We hope to never need those preparations. But hope is not a strategy, and we learned long ago that being unprepared is how species die. Velmath's earlier unease crystallized into genuine fear. These soft-looking creatures with no claws or armor came from a world of constant danger and had a history soaked in blood. They had spent 2 decades building an empire in secret, while the assembly assumed they were either dead or afraid. They were neither. They were ready. Qual's report arrived in the middle of the night cycle, and Velmoth read it with growing horror in the privacy of his secured quarters. The information broker had earned every credit of his substantial fee. The document was comprehensive, detailed, and absolutely terrifying. Subject: Human Military Capabilities Assessment. The report began. Executive Summary. Recommend immediate revision of Earth's threat classification from negligible to extreme caution advised. The report detailed everything. Human ships were built with redundant systems, armor plating 3 times thicker than standard, and could operate in environments that would crush vessels from most other species. They had weapons that used simple kinetic energy, accelerating dense metal projectiles to devastating speeds. They had missiles with nuclear warheads. They had energy weapons adapted from industrial mining tools. They even had biological weapons, though the report noted these were kept in secure storage and supposedly never deployed. But what caught Velmoth's attention most was a section labeled Strategic Philosophy. According to Qua's analysis, humans didn't plan for single battles or even single wars. They planned for extended conflicts lasting decades. They had contingency plans for losing planets, losing fleets, even losing Earth itself. Every colony was designed to be self-sufficient. Every colony was self-sufficient. Every ship could operate independently for months. Every soldier was trained to fight without support or resupply. Humans prepare for total war by default, the report concluded. Their entire military structure assumes worst-case scenarios and plans accordingly. They don't hope for victory. They engineer it. Velmoth needed to confront this directly. He requested an urgent meeting with the human delegation, citing security concerns. To his surprise, Taewon agreed immediately and suggested they meet in one of the assembly's secure conference rooms. When Velmoth arrived, he found not just Taewon and Haijin, but 3 other humans he hadn't met before. One was clearly military, wearing a formal uniform with various insignia. Another was a woman with sharp eyes who carried herself like a predator sizing up prey. The third was Bioram, the engineer from the delegation. Counselor Velmoth, Taewon greeted him warmly. Thank you for meeting with us. Allow me to introduce Fleet Admiral Jae-sung, Strategic Defense Coordinator Young-hee, And you've already met our lead engineer, Bo-Oram. Velmoth's antennae trembled. A fleet admiral. A defense coordinator. They weren't even pretending to be purely diplomatic anymore. I've received some disturbing information about Earth's activities over the past 2 decades. I imagine you have, Taewon acknowledged calmly. Would you like us to confirm or deny specific items? You've built an armada, Velmoth stated bluntly. 3,000 warships. That's more than some entire species possess. Jae-sung nodded. 3,247, actually. Though only about half are pure military vessels. The rest are armed transports and colony support ships. Why would you need armed transport ships? Because space is dangerous, Yin-hee answered. Pirates, equipment failures, navigational hazards. We don't send our people anywhere without the ability to protect them and get them home safely. Velmoth pulled up his datapad, reading from Quel's report. You have weapons banned by 600 separate assembly treaties. Nuclear devices, biological agents, kinetic bombardment systems. Some of these can sterilize entire planets. That's correct, Taewon confirmed without hesitation. Those treaties were written by species who didn't need such weapons. Most of you evolved on peaceful worlds with stable environments. You never had to develop weapons of mass destruction because you never faced mass extinction events regularly. We did. These weapons are terrible, and we hope to never use them. But we will not be defenseless. You colonized 14 systems without asking permission or even informing us, Velmoth continued. You claimed territory that could have belonged to other species. Bo-Oram spoke up for the first time. Every system we colonized was uninhabited and unclaimed according to assembly records. We surveyed them thoroughly, left markers indicating human presence, and established contact protocols in case any other species had conflicting claims. None did. We followed all established procedures. We just didn't announce it publicly. Why the secrecy? Velmoth demanded. Because we didn't know if we could trust you, Hyjin said flatly. Counselor, think about this from our perspective. We receive an invitation to join a galactic community we never knew existed. We're one species out of hundreds. We're technologically behind in many areas. We have no allies, no friends, no trade relationships. If we had shown up immediately, weak and unprepared, what would have stopped any of you from simply taking what you wanted from us? The Assembly has laws, Velmoth protested. Laws only work when everyone follows them, Yin-hee countered. And they only protect those who can enforce their rights. We've read your histories, Counselor. We know about the territorial disputes, the trade wars, the occasional police actions against aggressive species. The galaxy isn't as peaceful as you pretend. Velmoth wanted to argue, but he couldn't. The Assembly did have its problems. There had been conflicts, mostly minor, but conflicts nonetheless. And there were certainly species that had been pressured into unfavorable agreements because they lacked the strength to resist. So you built an empire first, Velmoth said quietly. You made yourselves too strong to threaten before revealing yourselves fully. We built a foundation, Taewon corrected. We ensured that if you welcomed us, we could contribute meaningfully. And if you rejected us or threatened us, we could survive independently. We wanted to come to you as equals, not as supplicants or victims. Jae-sung leaned forward, his expression serious. Counselor, humanity has experienced what happens when you're unprepared. We've been invaded, enslaved, conquered, and nearly exterminated at various points in our history. Usually by other humans, yes, but the lessons remain valid. We learned that peace is achieved through strength, trust is earned through capability, and survival requires preparation. Your people must be terrified of the universe, Velmoth said. And he meant it sympathetically. Not terrified, Hyjin replied. Cautious, realistic. We don't assume the worst of everyone we meet, but we prepare for it anyway. It's not about fear. It's about responsibility. Every human leader is responsible for billions of lives. We take that seriously. Bahram activated a holographic display showing Earth. May I show you something, Counselor? This is our home. One planet, beautiful and deadly in equal measure. It taught us to respect the universe's power. It taught us that survival isn't guaranteed, and that complacency kills. But it also taught us that cooperation, ingenuity, and persistence can overcome almost any challenge. The display zoomed out, showing the 14 human colonies glowing like small lights around Earth. This is what we built in 23 years. Not an empire, not a war machine, but a safety net. These colonies ensure that if Earth is destroyed tomorrow, humanity survives. They're our insurance policy against extinction. Lawmoth stared at the display, his mind racing through the implications. You're not planning to attack anyone. Absolutely not, Tae-Won confirmed. We want trade, cultural exchange, cooperation, and friendship. We want to contribute to the assembly and learn from the other species. But we will not do so from a position of weakness or dependence. And if someone does threaten you? Velmuth asked. Young-hee's smile was cold and sharp. Then they'll learn why human history is written in survival against impossible odds. We're very good at staying alive, Counselor, even when people try very hard to kill us. The emergency session of the Galactic Assembly was packed beyond capacity. Word had spread quickly about the human revelations, and every species wanted to be present for what many suspected would be a historic decision. Station 3. Row 47 was no longer empty. Tae-Won sat there calmly, with Hyjin standing slightly behind him in a position that was clearly protective. The other human delegates were scattered throughout the observer galleries, their presence a quiet reminder that humanity was watching everything carefully. Velmoth called the session to order, though it took several minutes for the chamber to quiet down. We are gathered to address the question of Earth's full membership status in this assembly. Recent revelations have raised concerns about human intentions, capabilities, and trustworthiness. Ambassador Tae-Won has requested the opportunity to address these concerns directly. Tae-Won stood, and the chamber fell completely silent. He looked around at the hundreds of species present, his expression calm but serious. Members of the Galactic Assembly, I understand your concern. You invited a species you knew nothing about to join your community, and we responded by disappearing for 23 years. Then we showed up with weapons, colonies, and military fleets. From your perspective, this must look threatening. He paused, letting that sink in. But I want you to understand our perspective as well. Imagine you discovered tomorrow that you weren't alone in the universe, that there were hundreds of other species out there, all more advanced than you, all with their own interests and agendas. Would you rush to meet them unarmed and unprepared? Would you risk everything your people had built on the hope that strangers would treat you kindly? Several delegates shifted uncomfortably. But that way, human caution didn't seem quite so unreasonable. Humanity made a choice 23 years ago, Tae-Won continued. We could either trust blindly or prepare carefully. We chose preparation, not because we assumed you were enemies, but because we couldn't assume you were friends. We didn't know you. We didn't know the galaxy. We only knew ourselves and our own history. He activated a holographic display showing Earth's timeline again, but this time focusing on different aspects. We showed you our wars and our weapons. Let me show you something else. This is the International Red Cross, founded in 1863, an organization dedicated to helping wounded soldiers and civilians during conflicts. This is the United Nations, established in 1945, our first attempt at global governance and cooperation. This is the World Health Organization, which eradicated diseases that killed millions. This is the International Space Station, our first collaborative space project involving multiple nations. The images continued, showing hospitals, schools, research facilities, art museums, music halls, and libraries. For every weapon we created 10 tools of peace. For every war we fought, we built 100 bridges afterward. Humanity is not defined by our violence. We're defined by our choice to overcome it. Minsu stood from the observer gallery. If I may add something, Ambassador. At Taewon's nod, he continued. Many of you have been reviewing human history and focusing on our conflicts. But consider this. We unified our entire planet. Every nation, every culture, every competing interest came together under one planetary government. We did this without conquest, without force, without subjugating anyone. It took time, compromise, and patience, but we achieved it. How many species here can say the same? A murmur ran through the assembly. Several species had unified through conquest or had never developed separate nations in the first place due to their biology or evolution. True voluntary unification was actually quite rare. K. Ruthik stood suddenly, his massive form commanding attention. I challenged the humans to test their strength. I mocked them for appearing weak. I was wrong. He turned to face Hyjin directly. Chief of Security Hyjin, I formally request information about your military service, if you're willing to share it. Hyjin stepped forward, her expression neutral. I served in Earth's consolidation wars, from 2296 to 2312. 16 years of active combat across 4 continents and 2 oceanic theaters. I held ranks from private to colonel. I was decorated 12 times for actions in combat and 3 times for humanitarian efforts during peacekeeping operations. After the wars ended, I spent 8 years training the Unified Planetary Defense Force before being assigned to the diplomatic corps. The chamber was absolutely silent. 16 years of combat. Krathek's people considered 5 years of military service to be an impressive career. This human woman had spent nearly 2 decades fighting, then chose to continue serving in a different capacity. You've seen battle that would break most warriors, Krathek said with genuine respect. Yet, you stand here speaking of peace. Because I've seen enough war to know its cost, Hyjin replied. Every person who serves in combat learns the same lesson eventually. Victory isn't about who's standing at the end. It's about whether what you fought for was worth what you lost. I fought to unify humanity so we could stop fighting each other. That was worth it. Fighting you would not be. Yan He stood from where she'd been sitting quietly. Let me be very clear about something. Every human in this delegation, every human in our colonies, every human on Earth knows exactly what we're capable of. We know we could fight you. We know we could probably win against most individual species. And we could definitely make any conflict so costly that victory would be meaningless. But we don't want that. She looked around the chamber, making eye contact with as many delegates as possible. We came here hoping for something better. We want trade partners, not victims. We want friends, not subjects. We want to contribute to galactic civilization, not conquer it. But we will not apologize for being prepared to defend ourselves if that hope proves false. Taewon raised his hand, and the chamber quieted again. I'm going to be honest with you, more honest than is probably diplomatic. Humanity is dangerous. We evolved as apex predators on a world that tried to kill us regularly. We fought each other for thousands of years before learning cooperation. We created weapons that could end all life on our planet. We are capable of terrible things when threatened or desperate. He paused, his voice growing softer but somehow more intense. But we're also capable of incredible kindness. We create art that moves us to tears. We build hospitals in war zones. We risk our lives to save strangers. We teach our children that all life is valuable and that cruelty is wrong. We dream of stars we've never seen and work for futures we won't live to witness. We are dangerous, yes, but we're also hopeful, compassionate, and stubborn enough to believe we can be better than our worst instincts. The ambassador took a deep breath. So I'm asking you to make a choice. You can reject us, revoke our membership, and send us back to our corner of space. We'll survive. We'll build our own civilization, and maybe someday in the future, we'll meet again under different circumstances. Or you can accept us with all our flaws and all our potential, and let us prove that we came here in good faith. Velmoth stood slowly, his antennae quivering with emotion that was hard to identify. Fear, yes, but also something else. Respect, perhaps. Or hope. Ambassador Taiwan, you've given us much to consider. I move that we adjourn for deliberation. Actually, Counselor, I'd like to make an alternative suggestion, Taiwan said. Instead of deliberating behind closed doors, why don't we vote now? In the open. Let humanity see whether you welcome us or reject us. And let you see whether we accept your decision with grace or with anger. It was a bold move, putting everything on display like that. Several delegates looked uncomfortable, but others nodded in approval. Transparency was one of the Assembly's founding principles, though it wasn't always practiced. Very well, Velmoth agreed after a moment. We vote now. The question: should Earth be granted full membership status in the Galactic Assembly, with all rights and responsibilities that entails? All in favor? The voting displays lit up around the chamber. Green lights for yes, red for no. Slowly, the lights appeared. Krithik voted green immediately. Tikal and several other species followed. Some voted red, their fear outweighing their curiosity. But more voted green. When the count finished, the result displayed on the main screen: 847 votes cast, 723 in favor, 94 against, 30 abstaining. Velmoth's antennae relaxed in what might have been relief. The motion passes. Earth is hereby granted full membership status. He paused, then added something that wasn't in the standard script. Furthermore, I move that Earth be granted a permanent seat on the Security Council. Given their significant military capabilities and demonstrated strategic thinking. That vote passed too, though with a narrower margin. Taiwan bowed deeply, a gesture of respect from Earth's traditions. Thank you. Humanity will strive to prove worthy of this trust. And to those who voted against us, we understand your concerns. We hope to address them through our actions in the years to come. As the session adjourned, delegates clustered in small groups, discussing what had just happened. The general consensus seemed to be a mixture of relief and nervousness. They had accepted humanity, but everyone understood that the galaxy had just changed in fundamental ways. Krithik approached Hyjin directly. I would like to arrange cultural exchange between our species.